This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and our guest today is Covey Denton. Covey is the Science Department Chair at Greenfield School in Wilson. She teaches science to middle and lower school students. The school itself has students from ages of 2 years to 12th grade. If I got that right, Covey?
That's correct.
Covey, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to mention before we go further, just by way of introduction, that although on Grace Notes we talk with people whose names may not be household words, we also have, on occasion at least, people who are known in certain circles, and that's true of Covey. Covey is actually a national award-winning science teacher, having won the National Science Teachers Association Robert E. Yeager Award, and that was for being an outstanding science educator, and also the NSTA Maitland P. Simmons Award for new teachers. Covey has been teaching now just 5 years. Have I got that right?
That's
Covey?
correct.
And also the National Mid-Level Science Teacher Association Paul DeHart Award. It's really special to have you here, Covey. Thank you again.
I'm excited to be here.
Let's have you start, if you would, by giving us a little bit of a biography, where you got started from day one and taking this up to maybe 5 years ago.
To 5 years ago. So I'm a North Carolinian by birth. My dad and mom had me when my dad was in grad school, and we moved very shortly thereafter to Charlottesville, Virginia, and that is where I grew up, in Charlottesville. My dad was a teacher of accounting in the School of Commerce at UVA.
So teaching is in your blood, maybe?
It is in my blood. I remember being a little girl and sitting in on his lectures sometimes.
Uh-huh.
So it is something that I saw he truly had a passion for, and he had a gift for it as well. His students loved him.
You told me before we came into the studio that he was a little bit different in terms of some of the choices he made, or at least not your typical UVA professor.
That is true. He was probably the coolest accountant you would ever meet. My dad rode a Fat Boy, so a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and he wore Hawaiian shirts and listened to Jimmy Buffett nonstop. So he was a cool guy.
Especially unusual for an accountant.
Yes, especially unusual for an accountant.
Tell us a little bit more about your family, siblings and mom.
Okay, so I have two siblings. I have an older brother and a younger brother. And my older brother faced difficulties. When he was born, he was blind and deaf, and he had cerebral palsy. So he was in a wheelchair, and he had lots of seizures every day. And so our family dynamic was a little bit different than most. My mom spent a lot of her time caring for him. He was 8 years older than I was. And when me and my younger brother started school, my mom decided that she needed to focus on herself, and she had it as a goal to become a nurse. So she went back to school, and she got her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing and her Master's of Nursing, and eventually her nurse practitioner's degree. And I can remember doing my homework alongside my mom, who was doing her homework. And if she had to go to the medical library to do research, she would get what we called our gross picture books, and she would get the books on plastic surgery or gunshot wounds. And me and my younger brother would sit there looking at all of those pictures and images. And we really just gained a lot of respect for my mom, because she did all the typical things that a mother would do. She went to our soccer games. She came to watch me play volleyball, but she had her own life too. And she went back to school and was an amazing nurse.
And your mom being also responsible for your older brother who had very significant challenges.
Yes.
Take us from Charlottesville to wherever you went next.
Okay, well, growing up, I always heard, when you go to Carolina, when you go to Carolina. And so when I was looking at colleges to go to, when I got accepted into UNC Chapel Hill, I knew that that's where I would like to go. And so I came home to North Carolina, where I had started out, and I've been in North Carolina ever since.
Tell us about this first song that you've identified, Covey, Be Young, Be Foolish, Be Happy by the Tams. Why is that special to you?
So this song is special to me because it's a song that my dad and I danced to at my wedding. And the message of this song is just a great message. My dad squeezed joy out of every day. He enjoyed his life, and he taught us to enjoy our lives. I think growing up with a brother who had disabilities sort of made us grateful for the things that we had. And we really wanted to be happy every day. We wanted to find joy in the everyday. And that's something that my parents really instilled in us as children, that you're young, you can be foolish, but most of all, let's be happy. Let's find joy.
And I gather that's something you've made a real effort to pass on to your own kids.
It definitely is. I want my children to have just that inner contentment and inner joy and just enjoy their lives.
Let's hear the song. Be Young, Be Foolish, Be Happy by the Tams.
Girls, stay happy. Be young, be foolish. Girl, be happy.
That was Be Young, Be Foolish, Be Happy by the Tams. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Covey Denton. Covey, you mentioned while we were listening to that song something more about your dad.
Oh, he loved to shag dance.
Great shagging song.
It is a really good shagging song. And he and my mom can do all the spins and all the twirls, and I trip over my feet.
I noticed that one of the lyrics in that song is, "Life is too short to worry about unimportant things." And I gather that ties into some of what you try to instill in your kids. We mentioned your kids. Tell us about them.
So I have 3 kids. My son Elijah is 12, my daughter Lydia is 10, and the baby Bethany is 8. They are truly amazing children, and my son is actually the one who nominated me for this program.
Well, we accepted the nomination because he had such great things to say about his mom. You told me before we came into the studio that you and your kids really operate as a unit. And I understand that you moved from Durham to Wilson about 5 years ago after you were divorced. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
How did things go that first year for you in Wilson?
That first year was one of the hardest years I've ever had in my life. We had a lot of major life changes that year. We went from being a homeschooling family living in a 2-parent home with a stay-at-home mom to a mom that had to work full-time. The kids started a new school. They had to learn all the social rules. My youngest had to be put in daycare. And about 8 weeks into the school year of all these major changes, my dad got diagnosed with lung cancer. And so that whole first year of teaching was just putting one foot in front of the other, trying to get through each and every day as we were just struggling to find any sort of normalcy in our lives in the midst of all of those changes.
How did things turn out for your dad?
They did not turn out well. The cancer metastasized to his brain and other areas. And unfortunately, about a week after the end of school, my dad passed away.
A real loss for you, I know, and
It was.
and for the kids. How were things for you financially and just in terms of running the household?
So, when you go from being a stay-at-home mom, you don't have to worry about the bills as much as you might as a single mom. And so there was a lot of finding out what in our budget we could afford and what could we do, and learning how many times we could eat out or how much to spend on groceries, and just trying to figure things out on a teacher salary, what we were able to and weren't able to do. So it was a struggle that first year financially to figure out where we stood and what we needed to do.
How'd you happen to get into teaching? I mean, you went from not having worked in any significant role financially prior to that to teaching. How did that come to happen?
So as a graduate student at Carolina, I taught as a TA, and that was a part of my job that I really enjoyed. But my background is biomedical engineering, and that's sort of what I did in the field that I went into prior to having my son. After being a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and you're out of the field for that long, the field just races ahead. And so I felt at that point that there was so much catch up that I would have to do to be able to go back into biomedical engineering that I needed to find a job that would benefit my family and allow me to have time with my children so that I could see them through all of these changes. And I applied to become a teacher. I'd done some teaching in co-ops as part of homeschool groups. And a lot of my trainings and things that I did when I worked for the Division of Services for Deaf and Hard of Hearing were for 911 centers and hospitals. And so I had a lot of public speaking experience, and I was able to sort of tie that into my love of teaching. And looking back growing up, I remembered my dad and his passion for teaching. And that's something that I felt like I sort of had in me somewhere, and I wanted to see if I could bring it out.
Well, you obviously have found something that your peers acknowledge is a real strength with the awards that you've won. You kind of scooted by that reference to the School for the Deaf, and I don't have the full name right. Tell us more about that and your experience there.
So after graduate school, I had done all of my research with cochlear implants, which is sort of an implantable hearing aid. And I went on to work for Division of Services for Deaf and Hard of Hearing, which is a state organization that serves individuals in our state who are deaf and hard of hearing. And so I was a technology specialist, and I traveled covering 24 counties, doing 911 trainings and hospital trainings and trainings in nursing homes, teaching people how to use technology to more effectively communicate with people who are deaf and hard of hearing.
Let me have you go back to your kids and your family. After that first year, how did things go?
Things started getting exponentially better. It just started snowballing. So that first summer, I treated myself to a teacher professional development called Science in the Rockies. And when I went to Science in the Rockies, I got to meet a man named Steve Spangler, who...
Rockies as in the Rocky Mountains.
As in the Rocky Mountains,
Okay.
Yes. I got to go to Colorado. And he sat next to me on the bus, the leader of this whole conference, and talked to me for 45 minutes on one of our field trips. And he encouraged me to go back to school to get my master's, and he gave me lots of pointers for amazing ways to engage my students in the classroom. And I really took his advice to heart and started implementing a lot of what I learned in that workshop. And it was transformative. My classes started getting noticed by the newspaper, and then I ended up winning an award, and then I ended up being asked to be on the news to do a science segment on the news, and it just snowballed very quickly, and the blessings just kept coming one after the other, and I found myself waking up every day excited to go in and be with my students, and I think my excitement is what makes my classes so amazing, because I just transfer that excitement onto the kids, and they can't wait to learn science either.
So your kids as students and also your kids at home.
That's right.
Your
my
own
kids. At home.
How does your enthusiasm and passion connect with them?
So I always encourage my children to use what we call their God gifts. So each one of my kids has things and areas that they have strengths in that their siblings don't. For instance, my son, he's very meticulous. He's type A. He likes things organized, and he owns a label maker. That's just his personality.
This is Elijah.
Okay. He's also just loves language and writing, and that's a real strength of his. My middle daughter, I swear her first words were ta-da, and it has just gone from there. She does children's theater. She gets no butterflies. She is a wonderful public speaker. And then my youngest... This is Lydia. And then my youngest, Bethany, is just the most good-natured, easygoing child that you've ever met. So when we go out and we do science shows places, each child plays to their strengths. So Elijah helps me plan the experiments that we might want to do, and he packs the bags to make sure that we get there with everything. Lydia is sort of the spokesperson for the trio, and she'll get the experiments started and really get everybody's attention because she can be loud when she needs to. And then Bethany is just, if anybody's getting frustrated or they don't understand, she comes alongside of them and just makes it go so much smoother. And their gifts just combine to make them an amazing team.
Tell us about this next song that you've identified by Bruno Mars.
So the next song by Bruno Mars is You Can Count on Me. So it's something that I tell my kids all the time. You can count on me. I'm the one that needs to worry about the big stuff. Where are we going to get our money, and what are we going to do on vacation? And, I don't want them worrying about things that they don't have control over. But they can count on me in the little stuff too. So when my son wanted to learn how to do a green screen, I learned how to do it so I could help him. When my daughter had to learn how to juggle for community theater, we learned how to juggle together. So they can count on me on the really big stuff and on the really little stuff.
Sounds like you with your kids have figured things out pretty well in terms of who does what and whom to count on for what.
That's right. Covey and her science kids, that's what they call us.
Let's hear the song, Count on Me, by Bruno Mars.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, you can count on me, 'cause I can count on you.
That was Count on Me by Bruno Mars. If you're just joining us, this is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button. Our guest today is Covey Denton. Covey, you were saying, as we were listening to that song, something about karaoke. What is that about?
Oh, we love to laugh and have fun in our house, and several of our friends have karaoke machines, and Bruno Mars, and that song specifically is one of our go-to karaoke favorite.
Well, a good one in terms of its theme, too, for sure.
Absolutely.
Count on me. Speaking of counting on you, tell us a little more, Covey, about how you and your kids spend your time outside of school.
So science is something that's really important to me, and my kids have caught the science bug as well. We sort of thought of different ways that we might be able to share science with groups of people that might not get a lot of exposure to it. So my second year of teaching, it started by inviting the deaf school to come for a Mad Science Day in my classroom. So my students and my own children, they all learned different phrases in sign language to make them feel welcome. And we had a big day of science for the deaf school.
Again, you having grown up knowing sign language because of your brother, or learning sign language.
I learned sign language, growing up. So I was able to share that day of science in sign language with the students from the deaf school. So it was really memorable and really exciting, and it's a tradition that we've continued every year at Greenfield, having the Day of Mad Science.
You were telling me that the kids from the deaf school showed up and were greeted by...
Every class had learned a different phrase in sign language. So some of the classes wanted to learn how to say, "Be careful of the snake," because we have a class pet of a snake and two lizards. The other one said, "The lizard loves pets," or "The lizard loves lettuce," I think is what they decided to say. Another class said, "Welcome to science," or "Have fun building rockets," because that first year they built rockets with me. And it was just surprising, I think, for the teachers and the students to walk on campus and feel so welcomed.
And you've taught science yourself in sign language?
I have now. Teaching them, I did email their teachers ahead of time to learn a bunch of the science signs that I needed to know, because in just general conversation, Erlenmeyer flask doesn't come up very often. So I did have to learn some specialized signs to be able to communicate effectively.
It's been a long time since I've heard reference to Erlenmeyer flask. I think that takes me back to my high school chemistry days.
That's right. So, but it was very exciting for the children to be able to have a teacher that was speaking directly to them and not be going through an interpreter.
You and your kids have done things with other organizations. Is that fair?
That's true, yes. We volunteer every month at the Ronald McDonald House in Durham and host a science night for the families and the children that are at the Ronald McDonald House.
And what is the Ronald McDonald House?
The Ronald McDonald House is a place where families and children can stay while their loved ones are getting care at Duke Hospital. So there are families from Virginia or Maryland that come to Duke Hospital for very specific programs that Duke might be able to offer.
Their loved ones being kids, is that right?
Yes, there are a lot of sick children, and it's their families that stay at the Ronald McDonald House.
What kind of impact has that had on your kids?
It's hard. My kids cry on the way there and they cry on the way home. And it's hard as a mom to break their hearts that way. But I tell my kids, to make a big difference in the world, you need to make a lot of little differences. So they can't cure cancer yet. They might. They love science. Maybe they're the ones that will do it. But for right now, as a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, they can't cure cancer. They can't make those kids not sick. But what they can do, and what I try and make them feel empowered to do, is make that 1 hour an amazing time where the kid can forget that they're sick and that they can have fun doing science for that 1 hour. And it's hard because my kids know these are children the same age as me, and they have to go through things that I can't even imagine. And it breaks all of our hearts a little bit, but in a good way. It's teaching them to be compassionate, and it's teaching them to be humble.
As I understand it, you've also been connected with the Baptist Children's Home.
That's correct. Right? There's a home in Kinston called Kennedy House, and they have children who are in foster care that live on the property, and we did a day of science this summer with the children from Kennedy House.
And your own children are involved in that?
My own children ran the show. They sure did. So they learned all the science experiments and sort of decided what it is that they wanted to do. And we call it Kids Teaching Kids. So they shared with the kids at the Kennedy House their passion for science.
You've identified another song by the Newsboys entitled Love Riot. How does that happen to be one that you've selected that is special to you?
So my 10-year-old daughter had been begging to go to a concert for her birthday, and the Newsboys is her favorite band. She saw the movie God's Not Dead, and she just fell in love with the band. And so they came to Charlotte, and during their concert, they stopped everything and they shared about children who live in Central America who don't have access to clean drinking water or to clothing or to education. And I looked over and my 10-year-old had tears streaming down her face. And she says, "Mom, that's not right." And I said, "It's not right." She says, "I know I can't make a big change. I can't fix that country." She says, "Can we make a little change?" And I said, "Well, what little change do you want to make?" And she says, "Mom, it's only $30 to sponsor a kid. That's just $1 a day. So we have me and Elijah and Bethany, and that's $3 a day. We need to sponsor a kid for each of us." And so we walked over to the table, and she selected 3 children to sponsor, and we write them cards and letters. And Love Riot is the song that the Newsboys played while they shared the images of the children who we were going to be able to sponsor.
Where did that $1 a day come from?
So we looked at our budget, and we decided as a family that we would give up eating out. So we cut back on our trips to Chick-fil-A or to Applebee's, and we decided we would just cook our meals at home, and that's where we found the money to sponsor our children.
I understand that it has not stopped at 3 kids.
It has not.
Uh-huh.
So the 3 children that Lydia chose were 3 boys. So we call them our children. So now in our house, we had 4 boys and 2 girls. And my girls were very quick to point out that that's not fair. So a little while ago, we went to Wilmington to a Newsboys concert and again had the opportunity to sponsor some children. And the girls walked over to the table and they each got a little girl to sponsor. So now we sponsor 5 children through Child Fund International. And we've got 4 girls in our family and 4 boys in our family.
So Lydia and Bethany got things evened out with Elijah and the 3 other boys.
That's right.
The song that you've identified, you say you heard at a Newsboys concert as they were presenting information about Child Fund International. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the song?
It really speaks to my heart. It's talking about starting a love riot. You hear about riots and you hear about all the hate that goes on, and the Newsboys are trying to put their twist on it. Instead of spreading hate, they just want to spread love. And this is one way that you can spread love.
We'll hear the song in just a minute, Covey. First, let me say thank you for joining us today. It's been really special, a real treat. You're an inspiration and a challenge and just a great encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Let's hear the song, Love Riot by the Newsboys. You've been listening to Grace Notes, a special program here on Life 103.1 featuring people who may be relatively unknown, but who meet life's challenges in ways that brighten the lives of those around them. Our producer is Christina Dolan. I'm Alan Button, and we invite you to join all of us here at the station again next Friday at 5:30 for Grace Notes on Life 103.1.